Yeah. Well, yeah. So, all right. So I'll get this
Yeah.
recorded. All right, man.
Okay.
All right. So cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming back. I guess this is episode 10, and this week we're doing Midnight Mass. So thank you, Spencer, for doing this.
Thank you, Joey.
Yeah. And and Midnight Mass, directed by Mike Flanagan, and honestly, a bit of a local boy for us, being on the East Coast, I guess.
Where exactly is he from?
He's from Maryland, but he went to Towson, so only 40 minutes outside of Newark, so 30 minutes. So bit of a local boy.
I know he grew up on Governor's Island.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which was inspiration for Midnight Mass, living in a small town on an island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very fitting.
Yeah.
I guess we're pretty open to spoilers anyway, but I guess we'll just dive into it. So with this show, did you discover it just through Mike Flanagan, or did you just see it was popular on Netflix?
Funny enough, my mom recommended it to me, and
shit.
I don't usually watch stuff my mom recommends. I love her, but and she watches a lot of stuff, but our tastes are pretty different, and she's not usually into horror. But she recommended this, and and my girlfriend actually is really into Mike Flanagan stuff. Like The Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor and Oculus. I've only seen Oculus a while ago, but so that we kind of went into it, with that in mind, and it was really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me it was just I can't remember who recommended it to me. Actually, no, it was you. You sent me that message, and then I'm like, okay, and then I looked it up, and I couldn't believe I missed it because I'm a big Mike Flanagan fan. I hadn't seen Oculus, but I'd seen pretty much all his other stuff, like Hush. I've seen both The Haunting, Hills. Dr. Sleep was excellent. I thought that was a really good sequel spinoff. A great miss. And even something that I don't think it's a great movie, but for what it is, it's a pretty good horror. Ouija 2. Not necessarily great, but but it's in the fact that apparently I hadn't seen the first one, but the first Ouija was terrible, but to kind of have a garbage kind of sort of predecessor and not really much to pick off. He made a really good film out of it, and I kind of praise that. And it's even with some of his recurring cast, so it feels like his films are kind of becoming and his television shows are kind of becoming their own anthology. In some ways, you just have the same.
Well, it kind of sounds like
characters.
We were just talking about the Suicide Squad. It almost sounds like that situation where the sequel is actually better and done by a better director.
Exactly. And I'll even go as far to say with Mike Flanagan that he I think he's one of the best people working in horror right now. And I think we're in the best times for horror right now. Certainly better than the 80s, in my opinion. Cause
there is a renaissance.
Yeah, I mean, he's up there. I would say he probably has the best mass appeal, though. I mean, because if you're thinking other ones like Ari Aster or Robert Eggers, who we've spoken about, I think Mike Flanagan has the most general audience appeal. Maybe if you're talking, maybe Jordan Peele might have a bit more of an edge to him, but I think in terms of
Mike Flanagan has a lot of output too, so there's just more content from him.
Exactly. Well, he's a fucking workhorse. I mean, if you look at his filmography, not only for Haunting of Hill House, he wrote all the episodes, directed all the episodes, and I think he's also the editor too. So the credited editor. So it's just
I actually think I saw in 2016 he came out with 3 movies that he wrote and directed. And
it's edited. Fucking crazy. It's crazy because he also a lot of it also stars his wife. So I think that that helps him.
Sure.
Well, because Kate Siegel, I think is his is how you pronounce her name. Yeah. But yeah, you have Hush as well. Hush is a very overlooked film, and they did something else as well. It's some other horror film. But again, he's remarkably consistent and probably one of the most overlooked directors, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right. But Midnight Mass. So I think honestly, like one of the most interesting sort of like melodramatic horror series that's out there, to be quite honest. Like it's
I mean, it was more of a drama than a horror, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think the same thing. It's very much in the realm of like A Haunting of Hill House. And that's a family drama in the genre of horror. And I felt like this is very much the same, like just like a melodrama with horror tropes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because it really wasn't that scary. For the most part, there were some jump scares, and the last episode, I think, definitely delivered on the horror, but for the most part, I feel like that wasn't even the emphasis.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why like Mike Flanagan is just very specific. He doesn't go for scares. He just like he uses the genre as like a fantasy to be able to kind of explore the themes he's interested in. Yeah. So like, and even if you go through a bit of his filmography, I haven't seen any of his shorts, but before he got into horror, he wrote melodramas. So like, So and it feels very fitting for something like Midnight Mass, considering like it's very much like run-of-the-mill themes that you expect, like addiction, guilt, I guess like family dynamics, most likely like father and son.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also like blind faith is a big theme.
Yes. And I think that's probably like one of the biggest things. So kind of going into that, I know you're really into cult or like cult horror, or like, and I felt like that was there was a bit, there was definitely some of that in here. And that was a nice.
Sure. Well, it's funny because backtracking a little bit, it takes place on like a small town on an island. And I was reading a lot of the discussion on Reddit of this show, and some people were saying how it was unrealistic, or they felt that like the dynamics were kind of unrealistic, but people who grew up in a small town was like, this is exactly how it is in a small town where everyone knows each other, everyone's up in each other's business, just because like that's all, like, what else are you gonna do, the gossip of what this person's doing or that person's doing, it's like you have no privacy.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And even to the point where like I've gone to like I grew up in a Christian family. Like I'm not religious, but I was born Catholic, and I've been to those masses, those sermons in a small town. And yeah, they're a lot like that. It's literally like maybe like 40 people, or like it's the entire like small town all clustered together like for that Sunday. And like, yeah, it's like it pretty much hit the nail like right there, like kind of getting an idea of like how big like of a communal event like mass is in these small towns.
Oh yeah. Or then like if someone didn't go, like, oh, I saw you weren't at mass today.
Yeah, I know. And
what's with that,
like yeah, I mean, like, dude, rumors spread like fucking wildfire, like literally to the point where like I felt like that was a bit of like a theme throughout it, like rumors spread like wildfire, pun intended.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But that's also a spoiler, but we're already
that could be I didn't even think about how that could be intentional symbolism, perhaps.
Maybe, but I feel like that's just that was just me having fun. But but I guess kind of going to the beginning of it, I think I think the person to talk about in this show was Hamish Linklater, I think is the father's name, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
the priest
of oh yes. Okay.
Yeah. I think he, like, everybody goes on about him, and I think he's probably has the most talked about performance of that show, at least in my opinion.
Definitely.
Yeah. But
I mean, I never seen anything. I never knew about him before, but that performance was excellent.
Yeah, like it's just it's a lot of exposition, like a ton of long monologues, but still super compelling in my opinion. And I've only saw him like small bits. Like he was in The Big Short, was probably the biggest one that I've seen him in.
I have seen that. So okay, I've seen him in something.
Yeah, he played one of the brokers, I think, for Steve Carell in that film. He played like one of his
Okay.
brokers. Yeah, but yeah,
But
just go for it.
what was I gonna say? Well, about you talking about the monologues, and like, well, a big criticism of the show is that like all the monologues that characters go on, and like people don't talk like that. Most people don't talk like with
hmm
monologues, you know.
hmm
And I think sometimes they were kind of long-winded, but I did enjoy them. Even though I think because like, that can be an issue with writing sometimes is that like characters will just like like characters will sound kind of similar. So when like every character does a monologue, it kind of like it's like you can see through the artifice of the writing. But I think most of the monologues were compelling and interesting.
Yeah,
But I think sometimes they did go a little too long.
yeah, I can agree with that. But it is like the opportunity for the show to be able to make the characters more three-dimensional because I feel like what you have with
Sure.
melodramas often are a bunch of stock characters, but that's also part of that genre, that style is that you get a lot of stock characters. So the sort of presentational idea of the monologue is to kind of like make that kind of take that to make them more three-dimensional. I think it was probably for
Yeah.
me the most prevalent with the sheriff, who I think had a great
hmm
subplot in this.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that was good. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, but I think also I want to kind of go into it. So when I first started getting into the show, I was really like falling asleep. It was maybe like 2 a.m. and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to get through an episode. And I got to the episode where like
hmm
I can't I'm blanking on the lead character's name, but he saw like the figure in the overcoat and he's just like, what the fuck? And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah.
okay, like I'm kind of hooked. I'm into it. And then
hmm
the next episode starts with like this one, and I'm like going into it. I'm falling asleep. I'm just like, I can't watch this right now because if you see The Haunting of Hill House, there's a full Oneer episode, and I thought that's what this episode was going to be. So like, when I'm like falling asleep, like I just can't get this proper appreciation that I want to. So I took a pause from it and I returned to it, and I loved like the 10-minute tracking shot.
Where was that?
It was at the beginning of episode 2. It's where they found all the dead. It was the dead cats that were on the edge of the shore.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was a full it was like a full 10-minute oneer when they're trying to explain what the hell happened.
hmm
hmm
Okay, yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, and like, and what and like I'm trying to remember what exactly happened. So was it the angel that basically did that? If I remember correctly.
I believe that's yeah, because before, I think earlier in the episode when the boys were off, doing their thing, smoking weed on that they were in that other island nearby, they were smoking weed. And I think like there was something in the bushes or like um so I think that was supposed to be the angel kind of subsisting on cats. And that's kind of like an early sign that something's off.
Yeah. And I guess since we're talking about the angels, so I guess we have to kind of go into it. The angel's a vampire. Like,
Yeah, well, I have mixed feelings on this particular element of the show.
go for it.
Um, so I, so obviously the angel slash demon slash vampire was kind of part of the inciting incident of the show. Monsignor Pruitt finds this mythical figure out in I guess it was a Jerusalem or like Israel or
He went on his religious journey and was it like I
yeah,
think it was Jerusalem. It was like Jerusalem or Bethlehem. It was something like that.
somewhere around there. And
Mhm.
so obviously the angel was an important part of the inciting incident of the film, and then was the reason for a lot of the scares, the jump scares, a lot of the horror elements. And then even like in the second to last episode, the reveal, kind of the full reveal was like that was intense. And
Mhm.
I really I enjoyed the look of the angel, but I liked when we didn't see much of him. I liked just bits and pieces here and there. I felt like when we saw the full thing, it was a nice reveal, but then it lost a lot of its bite. I felt when we saw a lot of it, and it
Bite,
kind
pun
of,
intended.
to me, yes. Well, I didn't think about it. It just felt almost like, particularly in the last episode, it's almost like they didn't know what to do with this character that they introduced, because a lot of stuff, he's not on screen for a lot of it. He kind of is off doing, presumably, just eating people. And it felt like they introduced this fantastical element to kind of kickstart the story and provided a lot of the scares. It just felt like there wasn't a satisfying, and what they ended up doing was fine. They but the wings were stabbed, and the angel was probably not able to fly to the mainland in time. But I don't know, it just felt like a lot of the episodes or a lot of the last episode, they just were like, it's like they couldn't figure out a satisfying way to utilize the character.
Yeah, because once because it was essentially like everybody was on the same rampage with the vampire, and it just like kind of lost because it wasn't really much left to do with it, because once everybody was turning on it, once everybody was turning the vampires and turning everyone, it was just there wasn't really much left for the vampire to do other than just wait it out, and then so you're just kind of limited to it, that he's just this beast. He's just going to go hog wild. And it kind of took away from the cleverness of what the angel symbolically meant, like of how he was providing life. And I feel like there was something smarter they could have done with it, because you could tell that this angel was also just aware. It wasn't just like some lion or like some beast. There was probably something more under it, where like he's like very aware of like the social practices of what was happening at the church. So I feel like I would have just liked a little bit more cleverness than just hunger and thirst of blood, or like if that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, it almost feels like they only needed that character for like the inciting incident of the movie. It almost felt like even though I think, like I said, it provided scares, I feel like it wasn't even the focus of the story. It was more about these people, this town, and the psychology behind this kind of cult atmosphere, like and the religious element. And I think, and I just wish they developed it more. It almost felt like they could have just written that character out, and it wouldn't have made much of a difference.
I would agree with that. Because what could have just really happened was just like, the Monsignor could have just like gotten the blood, became young again, and whenever he needed more, he would just call upon the angel. Just kind of what he did anyway. But he brought the angel to the island, and I'm like, kind of not necessary. But again, I get it was just basically there for the scares to kind of help build suspense. But I guess in terms of rewatchability, there just wasn't really much for the angel left to do. But
I did like the element of like, because it's not entirely clear what it actually is.
Yes, I love that. Like,
because they say it's an angel, but it's more like a demon, but also could just be a vampire too.
It was very much inspired by like gargoyles. That's sign of like those sort of like the way they design those. Like, that's
true. I didn't think about that, but you're right.
But it's such a great setup, and even to the point where like the priest was in this weird way kind of like a rebirth of Christ. And I love that they combined the idea of using the blood with communion, like combining the blood with it was just such a clever idea. And it was really just to the point where there is symbolizing the angel as the new coming of Christ. So again, just kind of throwing in like a religious, like that religious symbolism with a vampire. I'm just like embodying that. Like it's the perfect blend of like how you use genre to kind of tell.
I agree.
It's just it was so great.
And I did. Going off on that, I did enjoy the cult elements, particularly like there's an obvious Jonestown reference with everyone drinking the blood and
the wine,
and basically dying, and then actually coming back in the show.
Yeah.
You know, that was a very obvious reference. But then I thought there was another reference I thought was a little more subtle, about the Heaven's Gate cult. Do you know about that one?
Probably if you mention it to me, but
It was the one in
doesn't.
the 90s where they were like a UFO cult, and they also, like Jonestown, they all kind of had a ritual suicide. Although in this case it wasn't coerced. People, they were just lying in beds, and like
Oh, is
didn't
it
seem
with
like
that
there was
bald
any
guy?
struggle.
Is it with the bald?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I know who you're
Yes.
talking about now. Yeah.
And it seemed like they were almost going to have a similar thing where in that one building they like set up a bunch of beds, and they're like, oh, everyone, we're going to sleep in here to avoid the light so we can journey on to
Smart. Clever.
our new life, you know.
That one's much more subdued. I didn't even think about that one, but the obvious Jonestown one with the Kool-Aid, the wine, I'm like, yeah, that's very much like, if you know what Jonestown was, that's a very much on the nose reference.
Yeah. But it worked for the show.
Yeah. And so kind of going further, we talked about the idea of blind faith. So I think that's probably like what I feel like the idea of blind faith makes people do crazy things. And like, you know, of course, in religion, you have
Exactly.
Who was the who was the sister in the television in that show? I'm trying to remember. It was very much like a Nurse Hatchet sort of character.
Oh, you mean the woman who was like evil, basically?
Yeah, like the kind of second in command sort of deal.
Bev Keane was her name, was the character's name.
Gotcha. Yeah. Because
the only one who I guess ended up being actually like just a shitty person completely with no redeeming qualities.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, that's what the show was ultimately like kind of about. Like one of the themes was redemption. And like, yeah, she was just like through and through a horrible person.
Yes. But she was one of those love to hate kind of characters.
Yeah. But even
like how the mom in the end confronted her and was like, you're not a good person.
Well, I think that is a thing, because I think they do bring up an interesting point that even though people are like, you know, followers of God in their eyes, like or like, you know, they spread the word of God, that doesn't make you a good person. If anything, it can make you worse. Yeah.
And, well, it's interesting because obviously blind faith is a big part of the show, and you know, I think on a superficial reading of it you could say it's anti-religious, but I don't think that's the case, because there are religious characters that are shown to be good. Like there are good characters that are religious in the show, but I think it's more about blind faith and what that can lead to, and this kind of groupthink mentality, and you know, when people are so like in this small town, they're so tight knit, you know, and you know, and especially when the miracles start happening, then it's you know, it becomes like a Pied Piper situation.
Yeah, no, it seems very much like that, and to the point where like we also look to be socially accepted. So, and I think that was most prevalent with the son of the sheriff, where he's trying to convert to Christianity. That's where I felt like it was most fascinating, is just like the son is completely justified in like when to explore this, like to explore Christianity, but and that's an honest depiction of like obviously within genre, but an honest depiction of what it's like to like kind of have like a crisis of faith, if that makes sense. And it could be triggered by just wanting to be socially accepted, especially being in a small town like that, where like you're already being subdued to a blind faith by your father. You're kind of born into religion. You don't necessarily choose it, like until significantly later in life, if that ever happens.
I mean him and his dad, since they're Muslim, you know, just, you know, felt very isolating, because like he was like kind of middle school age, the kid, and you know, that age is you're already kind of feeling like strange, and you're trying to find your place in the world. So, you know, add the kind of small town conformist, like conforming to religious practices, that dynamic, you know, it really exasperates that.
And I think I just really appreciated the ending, that like and again, kind of going off that father-son dynamic, that like they kind of had that finality of acceptance. And then he also like, again, going back to that theme of redemption where he redeemed himself by burning up the cots, the building of the cots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. Mm-hmm. So there was a scene where, so I was talking about this scene with a friend of mine the other night. And so what did you think about the, sorry, I'm going to look up his name. So what did you think about the death of like the lead character, like Riley Flynn, like Flynn? Like what did you think of his, Riley, sorry, I'm like fucking crazy. But like, what did you think about like what do you think about like his death?
I thought it was beautiful in a sense, because obviously he was haunted by his past, and I think he was trying to find his purpose in the world after that, because he was he was very much like kind of in the wind, and wasn't sure, he kind of didn't really feel kinship with most people on the island. But and then he wasn't really able to find anything to do. So I feel like it gave him purpose in a sense, because he was the one that was able to kind of reveal all of the crazy shit that was happening on the island. So and it felt like it made the most sense to do. Although I think the way he did it was kind of, I guess it was poetic and how it happened, but from a practical standpoint, it was also just very terrible.
Yeah, well, like
burning up in front of her, and then also that the boat could have caught on fire.
Well, like, because that's what I was thinking, because like, well, like I do think, because I do agree with you, it was poetic, but when he kind of gets out of that, like, I'm dying, like, I see like the girl that I killed, but like, I'm at peace, then it just shows him burning up. I'm kind of laughing at that jump, at that like that kind of jarring smash cut, because it's just so like so over the top that he's doing this in front of the girl, and it's literally like full on burned, like gone, and it makes me laugh a little bit just thinking about like how practically it's a little strange.
Very traumatic on her end.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Seeing this guy that she's like falling in love with, basically, and then and it was beautiful that he saw the woman that he killed right before, and because it was kind of like what because they were talking about the monologue of like what happens when you die, and that was very beautiful and poetic, and it felt I guess there's foreshadowing there, so it was I thought it was great, and visually too, I enjoyed it.
Also, another thing I briefly want to go into, so I want to also discuss about the theme of forgiveness. Like, again, another theme that's kind of popular in religion, but like, so the one thing I have to kind of point out was with the girl that was paralyzed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like, so I think one of like the major themes I kind of hit it. So that was probably one of the major arcs when it came to her with her blind faith, but also the idea of forgiveness. And like, and this is what, and when you mentioned that this could arguably be considered anti-religious, I feel like her arc is specifically, well, she's very religious, and she's probably like, she's a survivor and probably the most like morally good character of the show. That makes sense. And I think with her like forgiving the guy that shot her, well, sort of. She said like, I don't quite forgive it, but it was mixed. Yeah.
I think I forget her exact reaction, but yeah, it was kind of a mixed thing when she approached him. Yeah, which was very which hit hard for sure. Again, one of those monologues that had a big impact, even if it was like, all right, is this like 12-year-old girl really going to confront this man? But
yeah, well, like again, again, some of those little like over the top moments for melodrama, but still, like, yeah, I thought it was still like good for the show.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering. I'm also wondering, like, so when you realize like that's like a bit of the twist where like the Monsignor was essentially a vampire. Like, did you kind of see that coming, or did you, were you surprised, or was it shocking? Like, how did you feel about it?
Actually, my girlfriend predicted that earlier in the show. Yeah, she's like, oh, it's I mean, she's up. She loves horror. She's always up on that. She's like, oh, vampire. I was like, oh, okay. Then yeah. So I guess I didn't see it coming as much as her, but yeah. But I mean, it's a good reveal. Yeah.
Yeah, and to be quite like, because I had my one friend, she said she saw it from a mile away, and like while like once you kind of had that third episode, once he's kind of in that cave, I'm like, okay, now I see where this is going. But I didn't really get it off the bat. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I wasn't. It felt like you had a very general sense how it was going to go, but not specifically. It's like you knew this kind of small town religious atmosphere, and then there was something was off, and and it was going to reach ahead at some point.
Yeah. Also briefly talking about it, so kind of jumping to the last episode, there was the moment where like, so they were starting to turn people. There was one guy in that in that town who was turned, but purposefully, but his family wasn't, and so he ended up like killing his whole family.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of the idea that like, well, I thought it's the idea of like, I just lost my train of thought, but it's, while like, I mean, like, I feel like I'm saying something superficial here, like, the idea that like religion has good intentions, but the tactics can like, separate families. I don't know, like that feels very much like a cultish, superficial sort of look at it. But again, it's kind of going to like, while the intentions were meaningful, I guess for some of the people, like I turned him because I wanted to live because he was always nice to me, but like what I did to him is also he murdered his entire family.
Yeah, I mean, it's but also like, well, it's funny because they're like they become vampires, but there's a zombie element to it as well.
Yeah.
It almost felt like vampire zombies.
That's true.
But it's also interesting because the two parents of Riley, like they because like what happens with them is like they're able to resist the urge to like eat other people's flesh. So it seems like they do have some free will with that, even if it is like because there's like this strong urge that they have once they're turned to
well, like
people.
Well, like it's also kind of going to the theme of addiction in here. So like while they had the addiction counseling, like we're dealing with the addiction of vampires, like having that thirst and hunger for blood. Same with like you can easily replace that with alcohol. So
which was a big theme.
So like I think it kind of like, so what the show you can arguably say is just like addiction can be easily prone over as long as you have like the right foundation or like you're not going to do it to the people that you care about. You're not going to damage those people, but for some people they just can't control that impulse, that urge. But like I wish I rewatched it before I started this, but like I'm trying to think back to like the addiction circle with Riley and Monsignor, because I can't remember exactly how they explained their philosophies with how to handle the addiction. But that was like a very specific moment where like they had very specific contrasting ideas that I thought like I think with Riley, he said like, you have to acknowledge the addiction and work through it, or like and I think Monsignor was like you have the addiction and you just like, and that not necessarily I guess not necessarily suppress it, but like, because I can't remember exactly what Monsignor said. This is actually frustrating me that I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember that moment specifically. But there definitely was like, obviously he took a very much a faith-based approach to it. Because I think even AA is actually a real like a Christian organization, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't realize that was a Christian organization.
Hold on, let me look that up real quick. Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, well, it's it at least started that way.
Okay, it started that way.
Yeah, yeah, it at least started that way. So, but yeah, I wish I did remember the specifics of that scene, because that was very intense.
Yeah, I mean, because like if I don't want to just say it off the top of my head, like what I'm thinking, like, because if I'm thinking blind faith, it's just the idea that like, you're like, you can use like your God will give you willpower to like, to work through your addiction. But then the contrast was just like, it's okay to acknowledge your addiction. Like you can't really suppress it, but you have to know that it's there. So like, you can do your best to like live with it.
Like, wasn't he saying, like Riley was saying, like he has like having like a conversation with yourself, something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. That's So, so it was pretty much you're talking to like your shadow self, if that makes sense. I think that was how he felt about his addiction.
But so going back before, I wanted to mention this earlier. So when the son of the sheriff, like when he was getting interested in Christianity and kind of conforming to the town, trying to fit in, because I went to Catholic high school, and I didn't grow up religious at all, actually. And I was even talking about this recently. So for me, all the religious elements, because I consider myself an atheist at that point, but religion was kind of novel to me. Going to Catholic school without any religious training. So I actually, during the time in high school, I would say you could say I tried out Christianity. I didn't become baptized, but I did I tried it out, and I went for it, and so I tried to see how it was, and it wasn't for me ultimately. But I can totally understand being young and impressionable, and well, at least for me, I didn't really, it was something different, and because if you grew up with religion, it's like, by the time you're a teenager, it's just like, oh yeah, going to church is whatever. It's kind of mundane and boring at that point. But for someone who has never went to church or had any of that kind of experience, it's interesting. It's different.
Yeah. It's very much like anthropological. Like do you feel like, you're you're trying to like figure out what the hell's like going on? Like you're just trying to see like, you're observing like the social group like up close. Like what the hell are like all these rituals? Why are you like putting your like why are you in a line to drink wine?
Yeah.
But
it was
like
foreign to me.
Yeah. And I kind of different for me, because I like you, I'm not like religious. Like I identify pretty much as an atheist as well. But I was born Catholic. I was baptized. Like I went through communion, and then I think the reason and honestly, I was so glad I didn't have to go to Sunday school anymore. That was lovely. But I'm sure my mom was not thrilled about that. I think my parents allowed me to stop going to church, and I don't think it was for this reason, but I'm sure it helped. It was right around that time where like the religious scandals in Boston found out was happening in Delaware. Sure. Yeah, so like I think they said, if you don't want to go to church anymore, that's okay. I'm like, okay. Like I didn't want to be confirmed. I'm just like, I'm cool with like if I did go to church in the past like maybe 5 years, a handful of times, maybe like 3 or 4 times, just to appease my mom or like my or like my dad, because they're still believers in like in Christianity and well in Catholicism. They're still followers in Catholicism, but they understand that I don't really believe in that, but they know that I do it. Like I will go with them just for like to be with family, like for the familial aspect.
Yeah.
And what's even crazy is just even though I'm an atheist, like I did volunteer at a religious carnival, just like at a carnival run by a church. It's not a religious carnival. There's not like Christian rides. Yeah, but that would be interesting. That'd be a great theme park.
Yeah, the roller coaster to heaven, and then it descends down to hell.
Oh God. But again, like I feel like religion can at least offer a community for you to be able to find, because I get.
Oh, definitely.
Well, like kind of going away from the television show briefly, but still going a little more into religion. I get what it's like to move far away, obviously, but like but a way you can find a community to be able to be close with when you're lonely is through religion. Like you can find very like-minded people, like very, very easily through church. Like, so if you're like, new to a location, you're just like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm a Catholic. Let me see if there's any or Christian. Let me see if there's any churches around. Like, if you want to try to find like a social circle or get a social group together. And like, again, I still have to praise religion for like the community that it can bring. But again, just some of the tactics can just be like, is what can turn a lot of people off, because I never try, even though we have our beliefs, I never try to push people to like one direction or another. I would just say if you're Buddhist, Jewish, Protestant, whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me. Just but as long as you're and it shouldn't matter what you think of what I say. If you believe in God, that's cool. But but I just think it's concerning when you're kind of going off blind faith, because if you believe in God, that's okay. But just be willing to just be thoughtful about it. Just don't do it just because you're born into it and you grew up with it. Have a little more reason behind it, because at that point it might just be, at least in my opinion, I feel like it's indoctrination.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, going off on the community thing, because these days in America, we kind of have less of a sense of community than we used to, as a society. And that's for multiple reasons, but religion is because just going to church before, it's almost everyone went to church, that was just the thing you did. And that is not as common these days. And even outside of the religious element, there's people move around more and more transient, as you know very well. So there's a little bit less of a sense of community in America in a lot of ways. But yes, religion can provide that sense of community, because some people go to mass just mainly for the community aspect. So, and we're all part of, we all have our own tribes that we feel associated with and we identify with. So for a lot of people, religion is their tribe, and that's how they primarily identify themselves.
And just kind of briefly going into the idea of why do I keep forgetting her name? Bev.
Keane.
Yeah, Bev Keane. Sorry.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting her name. But kind of going into her a little bit. I think some people that are religious just think they're good people because they are religious, and I just feel like that's a dangerous way of thinking, because
and you can tell she's a super jealous, insecure person.
Yeah, I mean, I don't because I don't, by no means do I think religious breeds bad people, but I think when you have something where it allows for forgiveness, some people that have bad qualities use that to excuse bad behavior. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Because the idea of I wish they explored confession a little bit more in here, because I feel like it was briefly touched upon, but I feel like confession is just one of those things where I think people at least what I believe in religion is just I think people that do maybe have bad qualities use confession as like the outlet and their excuse to be able to do like to continue that behavior. They don't necessarily look for change.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I'm not saying like I'm not saying that's universal. I'm just saying like it's probably for a smaller portion of the followers, but
I mean, there's I'm just saying, like, there's assholes that are religious, there's assholes that are non-religious. You'll find all kinds of people. It's just they'll kind of utilize what they can for their own selfish reasons.
Exactly. I mean, like, it's kind of going to the like. You ever heard of the horseshoe theory with politics?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what the left and right would be, but it's kind of like the same idea for religion. Like you have your share of like very nice people, and
when the two extremes kind of the two extremes, at least in some ways, end up being similar.
Yeah, exactly. So it's to the point where it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what you believe, is just as long as you're like being the best person you can be while providing support to the people around you. I think that's really what regardless of like your belief in God, but I think that's like a bare simple human being, that I think that's what the idea of what people should do.
Yeah, I agree.
So I guess kind of going back to the show now, went on for a religious tangent. So I kind of want to go into a bit of the ending where, I thought it was a very sweet ending. They're kind of going through the hymn, and then dawn breaks. With the kids on the boat, I feel like it was a little abrupt, but at the same time, I also really liked it. I think I was just looking for a little more closure, but I think I was just surprised that it ended up a little bit abruptly. But how did you feel?
I loved the ending. I thought it was beautiful, the sunrise. And I guess it was kind of bittersweet with a lot of the characters, but it kind of felt like it was very appropriate, and it's interesting seeing what each character was doing, and like it wasn't like Bev Keane was like trying her best to like stay alive basically, but she couldn't. I think she was the only one that was actually like resisting the death, and which was like, her true colors were shown in the end, and it was and then the sheriff and his son were praying at the end, and a lot of people ended up, they're kind of almost in a way going back to what got them in that situation in the first place, which is their faith. Even though they kind of, which I don't think is necessarily it wasn't necessarily anti-religion, but it definitely was. What was I going with that? It was beautiful because it was people coming together in the end, and realizing what they had done, and what had led them to this chaos. But in the end, they accepted it, and they kind of went back to the roots of their spirituality. And I like that the two kids were escaping on the boat, and then at the very end, her legs were went back to being she basically went back to being disabled, which so like the spell was broken, basically. But it was kind of ambiguous about the angel / demon / vampire, and whether he made it to the mainland. I don't think he did. I think the implication with both like the wings being cut or cut through, and like her legs not working anymore, I feel like that was, to me it was heavily implied that he didn't make it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, because just considering the circumstances, and I feel like it offers a little bit more of the final conclusion of just tying up all the loose ends. I feel like that was that's a good way to think of what happened. But I think the one thing that makes me think it was abrupt, even though like I still agree that was the right ending. I know you haven't seen The Haunting of Hill House or Bly Manor, but like no, it's okay. I like a very minor spoiler. Like both those shows have a lot of closure. Like they're actually very sweet endings. And I think I was expecting that with this show, considering like same director, like going off the preceding shows. It was just, while like overall it was sweet, it didn't really, there was just a lot of closure that those shows had that didn't have a midnight mass. But I was thinking about it because when at first I was a little bit like taken aback with the midnight mass ending, because I think I was just looking for like a little bit more to tug at, or at least a little bit more like finality. But when I thought about it, I'm like, there's not really much else to really add, because you would just have like the fairies come in first thing in the morning at dawn, and then the kids have to explain what the hell happened. And that's pretty much it, because everybody else is dead.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I thought it was a very appropriate ending. And also, but actually Mike Flanagan stated that it was purposely ambiguous with the angel and what happened, whether or not he made it to the mainland.
Yeah.
But to me, I thought I interpreted it as he didn't.
Yeah, same here. I mean, there is room for a sequel, but I feel like for a show like this, it's very good as just a standalone. I think it's
sequel.
Good. Yeah, that's why I said like it's very much good as a standalone. If you want to do something that's similar to it, just make it a completely different project. Like you could have similar themes and shit, but like just leave it alone.
Yeah, I should stay as is. It was written as a feature originally, actually.
Yeah, I definitely believe it. But definitely I feel like this works better as a series. Like I feel like it's much more pace. I think it's just much more paced better. And especially for what you're trying to hit with all these certain subplots to kind of match with your themes. Like, yeah, it worked a lot better.
It would be an interesting challenge to edit this down to like a 2 or 2.5 hour long movie, you know?
I mean, like, because what subplots would we be able to get rid of? I mean, like you would essentially have to knock out a bit of Riley's like personal demons, I think. Like you would maybe have to eliminate.
I'm not sure. Oh, go on.
Yeah. Oh no, I was gonna say like, because I am trying to think of like other subplots you would have to eliminate. I mean, like maybe with like the girl and her and like the guy that shot her, maybe you have to kind of get rid of that. Like I think you need the Muslim father and son. That's a necessity. Like I feel like the entire last episode you need. Pretty much everything in that last episode is pretty much.
Yeah, I mean it would be difficult. I would just imagine like a lot of trims, like just a lot of small trims throughout.
Yeah, but even then you're talking like 7 hours and like 2.5 hours. So I think it would be.
Yeah, I mean, if you take away, I think one of the episodes is like half hour long. So like if you take away all the credits, it might end up being like 6 hours or something. But
fair. Yeah. It would be an interesting challenge, but again, you know, I think like you need that. I feel like you need that beginning mystery with the with
I like the
Monsignor.
I wouldn't necessarily want it to be a feature. Because it was. I think there's some features that would benefit from being like a series like this, you know, extended and things are fleshed out more, because that's the advantage of a show, is that you can live with the characters more and they can develop more slowly over time. But then there's situations the opposite, you know, where a show is just too bloated and it's like, all right, well, this could have been 2 hours, you know?
Yeah. I actually, not related to Mike Flanagan or this show, but one movie that I do believe that could have benefited from being a miniseries. Unfortunately, timely for this for the events. Contagion. Have you ever heard of it?
Oh, I haven't seen it. No.
Okay, it's a really good movie. Shockingly accurate considering it was 10 years before its time. But honestly, it's a film with great recognizable cast, but I feel like they kind of glossed over a lot of the stuff that could have probably been fleshed out more. But I have a feeling the only reason it was made into a movie, not a miniseries, is because there's no way people would be interested in this. Like, you know.
Well, also it was 10 years ago, so it was a different time.
Exactly. Oh, like no, that's why I'm joking. It was just 10 years ahead of its time.
Yeah. Well, oh,
Yeah. But
because
like
like just like series weren't like 10 years ago, like TV, like it was just before the sort of TV renaissance that we've been going through.
exactly, it was just like before like that whole Game of Thrones, the whole Netflix streaming, like it was just like right
Breaking
before
Bad.
that. Yeah, Breaking
Yeah.
Bad,
Or
exactly.
Breaking Bad was around at that time, but
Well,
it wasn't until later
it
did it
wasn't until
become
like
like huge.
it wasn't
Yeah.
until like 2012 is where like that was the hit. That was where like okay, streaming is here for television, and then like the whole boom of television just started happening. Like
Yeah.
2012
Because
onwards.
there's a lot of older movies that now probably would have been a series.
Yeah. Like
instead. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and here's the thing. It's crazy to think that Netflix essentially at that time had a monopoly on streaming because Hulu was essentially nothing at that time. It just had like retro episodes, but like
Yeah.
Netflix essentially had the monopoly on streaming from like what 2011 to like 2016, essentially.
Pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
well, because I mean, they were like if you think about it, Netflix is like the only like standalone streaming service that isn't from like a huge major corporation. Every other streaming service. I mean, Hulu used to be. It was like the major media companies came together for. They each had like a 20% stake in it, but then once Fox was sold to Disney, they owned 40% of it, and the rest of the companies just sold their shares. So that's why Hulu's owned by Disney at this point.
Yeah. But
yeah, every streaming service is owned by a major media company except Netflix. They're independent.
Yeah. So like, and again, that's what makes it interesting. And but this is what I love about Netflix is that I love that Netflix takes the most chances with their content, at least in my opinion. I mean, like HBO like is as well, but like I feel like with a show like this, Mindhunter, and like even like it's like True Docs, like even I feel like some of their true crime docs get a little are repetitive. I still appreciate the chances that it took initially with and the people they were able to attract, because that's like super enticing that they don't have to deal with like the kind of the same restrictions as they do to try to get like a mass release or like to try to like or try to get on a network, like where like just streaming
they don't have to worry about commercials or censorship or runtime.
Yeah, so just like
that's why I like how episodes could just be as long as they need to be.
Like it's perfect for someone like David Fincher, and like honestly, and I'm glad like someone like Mike Flanagan has been able to like kind of explore that, because a show like this where it could be considered controversial, even though like I don't think it is by any means, just like I like that it just wasn't really restricted. It didn't have like much of those restrictions, and even if it did, like I don't think if this were like a Netflix like a network series, like I think like it could still work, but I just feel like the pacing would just be different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It would have to kind of be more beholden to the conventions of network television.
Yeah. All right. I think that's going to wrap us up here. I think I know we're approaching up on the hour. All right.
Sure.
But yeah. But thanks, man. And honestly, I don't know what Mike Flanagan's doing next, but probably like
he's doing another Netflix show.
No surprise.
It's called The Midnight Club, actually.
Right. Actually, no. Now that you mention it, I think I do remember hearing about that. Like,
yeah, on Wikipedia, the overview says a group of 7 close, terminally ill young adults resides in the Rotterdam home hospice run by an enigmatic doctor. They meet at midnight every night to tell each other scary stories. One night, they make a pact that the first one to succumb to their disease is responsible for communicating with the others beyond the grave. After one of them dies, bizarre occurrences begin.
Okay. So
another midnight show.
Yeah, it looks like it. And
because he did two haunting shows and now 2 midnight shows.
Okay. Well, like I mean, he's gonna make these into trilogies at some point, but yeah, that makes sense. And and I'm just curious if he's gonna be directing all the episodes as well. Like, I mean, we'll see what happens when it happens.
Probably. Yeah.
Again, a fucking workhorse. But But yeah,
It
and I
seems like
see
he
that
takes a very hands-on approach to all this stuff.
exactly, and I see that Zach
Yeah.
Gilford is also in the show. So like the guy that played Riley.
Oh yeah.
And yeah.
hmm Yeah, Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. The
Shit, I
girl from
didn't
the
know
original
that.
Nightmare on Elm Street is this doctor in the show, so that's cool.
Oh no shit. I'm looking at that right now.
Yeah.
Fuck. I like to be honest, I haven't seen too many classic horrors, but that's like one of the few ones that I've seen. Like I've only seen like the Friday the 13th and like the first one, and then like the original Halloween, and like that. Like, but the only like sort of fun fact that I know is like, oh yeah, Johnny Depp's first role was in the Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Oh, and apparently, this new show is actually an adaptation of a novel. So.
What's is it the same?
It's called Midnight Club. The Midnight Club by Christopher Pike from '94. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, man. Well, I'll let you go. We'll try to do this again in another few weeks, but I appreciate the talk, dude.
Yeah, man. It's good talking. Always love talking movies and shows and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Appreciate it. All right, man. Well, take it easy. Enjoy your Sunday. I got work in the morning, so I gotta get some rest. Yeah. All right, man. Cheers. Take it easy.
See ya.
See ya.